Now turn to section 1.
You'll hear a tutor and two students discussing modern European writers. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Okay, so to continue our look at modern European writers who have focused on the future in their work, today we're talking about H.G. Wells. Last week, I asked you both to do some background research on Wells, which we're going to discuss now. Gitanjali, tell us about H.G. Wells.
Right. So, H.G. Wells was a hugely successful British science fiction writer, writing at the end of the 19th and the start of the 20th century, and much of his work focused on predicting the future.
Jason, do you think Wells was just using the future as a narrative device in his fiction?
No. He really believed we can predict the future. In fact, he gave a speech at the Royal Institution in London in 1902 called The Discovery of the Future. And the point he was making was that by looking at what you know about the present and about science, it's quite possible to predict the future.
Indeed. Gitanjali, do you think Wells was always optimistic in his predictions?
Not at all. In fact, he varied in his predictions from being extremely pessimistic about the future to being optimistic. Interestingly, one theory I read links the attitude in Wells's work to his own health. When he was writing The Time Machine, which was published in 1895, he'd just been diagnosed with an incurable fatal disease. Not surprisingly, the book is very pessimistic, being about a dystopia in the future, a long time in the future, the year 802-701 in fact, where there are two races on Earth, the Morlocks and the Eloi, and the Morlocks actually eat the Eloi.
I thought it was interesting, though, that it was H.G. Wells who actually came up with the phrase time machine. So despite being pessimistic, the work has had a lasting effect on our culture.
Right. After The Time Machine, though, H.G. Wells didn't die, of course, and his recovery might be why he began to be a bit more optimistic about the future.
So that brings us to his first utopia, Anticipations. Jason, tell us about that.
Well, Anticipations, or to give it its full title, Anticipations of the Reaction of the Mechanical and Scientific Progress upon Human Life and Scientific Thought, was published in 1901 and was set in the New Republic of the year 2000. Some of the things Wells predicts are fairly close to our reality today, including 24-hour news, global telecommunications, and even a European Union.
We'll come back to the accuracy of Wells's predictions a little later. Gitanjali, how was Wells's work received at the time?
Well, although Wells was extremely successful, not everyone respected his work or his predictions. Another well-known science fiction writer, Jules Verne, viciously attacked him for works such as The First Man in the Moon, which Verne argued weren't rooted in scientific fact at all.
That's right. Now, Wells wrote a number of other utopian visions of the future. Jason?
Yes. In A Modern Utopia, published in 1905, his vision was of a world where there's no private property, where everyone has access to wonderful healthcare, and interestingly, where everyone's personal information is stored on cards in a central database outside Paris. Apart from the healthcare, I'm not sure everyone today would see that as a positive view of the future.
Neither am I. And, on a similar note, Wells strongly believed in population control and in The Shape of Things to Come, which was published in 1933, he sees and supports a world where the population is kept at 2 billion. Once again, I'm not sure most people today would necessarily see that as a good thing.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
Gitanjali, in your research, did you come across anything about the world brain?
Yes, I did. It's actually very interesting. Throughout the 1930s, Wells predicted and supported the setting up of a huge world encyclopedia. And towards the end of the decade, in 1938, he wrote a series of essays called World Brain. In these essays, he called for the world to make use of modern technology to create an enormous global encyclopedia so that all our knowledge is available to all people, not just an educated elite. Wells envisioned this as probably being on microfilm. He thought it would allow anyone, anywhere in the world, to look at any book or any document. He also thought it would be created by everyone, once again, not just by an elite.
Yes, and as you can imagine, many people today say that the internet has basically fulfilled his prediction. Of course, it doesn't use microfilm, but essentially, it does meet all Wells's main requirements.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to section 2.
Section 2. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Mark has talked about a small animal. I'm going to give you a talk about a very big one. It's the giraffe, a tall, long-necked, spotted ruminant. Male giraffes are usually about 6 meters tall. Half of the giraffe's height comes from its neck, which is longer than its legs. A baby giraffe is 2 meters tall at birth. It can stand up by itself within a few minutes and can run well in about 2 days. A giraffe has big brown eyes which are protected by very thick lashes. Since it lives in parts of Africa which are usually dry with a great deal of dust, the lashes are an important source of protection. It can also cover its nostrils in order to protect its nose. It has 2 short horns on its head. Like the camel, the giraffe can go a long time without drinking water. One source of water is the leaves which the giraffe eats from trees. Since it is so tall, the giraffe can reach the tender leaves at the top of a tree. Giraffes usually live in small herds and often feed with other animals. Giraffes have two methods of self-protection. If something frightens an adult giraffe, it can gallop away at about 50 kilometers per hour, or stay to fight with its strong legs. Well, that's all I know about giraffes.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Peter and Kate have met in the coffee bar and they were having coffee together. Hi there, how are you going with your tutorial next week?
Oh, good. I've decided to talk about paper and its use.
Fascinating, I'm sure.
Yes, I think it's an interesting topic. Do you know how much paper you use every year?
Well, I've never thought about that. I can't answer your question. I suppose you can tell me something about it.
Okay, it'll be good practice for my tutorial next week.
How much paper does one person use every year?
In 1900, the world's use of paper was about 1 kilogram for each person in a year. Now, some countries use as much as 50 kilograms of paper for each person in a year.
This shows how far advanced the country is.
You're right. Countries like the United States, Britain, Japan, Germany and Sweden certainly use more paper than other countries.
I'm very interested in the history of paper. You're going to talk about it next week?
Yes, of course.
Where was paper first made?
In China. The Chinese first made paper about 2,000 years ago. China still has pieces of paper which were made as long ago as that. But Chinese paper was not made from the wood of trees. It was made from the hair-like parts of certain plants. In Egypt and the West, paper was not very commonly used before the year 1400. The Egyptians wrote on papyrus, a kind of paper made from the pith of the stems of tall aquatic cyperaceous plants. Europeans used parchment for many hundreds of years.
What was parchment?
Parchment was made from the skin of certain young animals. They were very strong. We have learnt some of the most important facts of European history from records that were kept on parchment.
Oh, I see. How about paper in Europe?
Well, paper was not made in southern Europe until about the year 1100. Scandinavia, which now makes a great deal of the world's paper, but didn't begin to make it until 1500. It was a German named Schraffler who found out that the best paper could be made from trees. After that, Canada, Sweden, Norway, Finland and the United States became the most important in paper making. They are forest countries. Today, Finland makes the best paper in the world, and the paper industry of the country is the biggest in the world. New paper making machines are very big, and they make paper very fast. The biggest machines can make a piece of paper 300 meters long and 6 meters wide in 1 minute.
Oh my goodness, that's amusing.
What are the uses of paper?
Paper is used for newspapers, books, writing paper, envelopes, wrapping paper, paper bags.
Yes, only half of the paper that is made is used for books and newspapers. Have you got an idea about other uses of paper?
No, I'm afraid not.
There are many other uses. Paper is very good for keeping you warm. Houses are often insulated with paper. You have perhaps seen homeless people asleep on a large number of newspapers.
Yes, I have. So they're insulating themselves against the cold.
You are right. In Finland, it is very cold in winter. It is sometimes 40 degrees below 0 centigrade. The farmers wear paper boots in the snow. Nothing could be warmer.
Oh, that's unbelievable.
Now more and more things are made of paper. We have had paper plates, cups and dishes for a long time. But now we hear that chairs, tables and even beds can be made of paper. With paper boots and shoes, you can wear paper hats, paper dresses and paper raincoats. When you have used them once, you throw them away and buy new ones. You know, the latest in paper seems to be paper houses. These are not small houses for children to play in, but real, big houses for people to live in. You can put one up yourself in a few hours, and you can use it for about 5 years.
Fascinating.
People have made paper boats, but they have not yet made paper planes or cars. Just wait, they probably will.
Well, I'm sure your tutorial will go really well.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3. Part 3.
You'll hear a conversation between the tutor and two students about the presentation.
First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
Good morning, everyone. Well, I think we can start straight away by getting Rose and Mike to do their presentation. Would you like to start, Rose?
Yes, well, we've done a survey on local entertainment. Basically, we try to find out how students feel about the entertainment in the town and how much they use it.
Yes, so we've called our project Out and About. Yes, that's a good title, Out and About.
We wanted to find out how well students use the entertainment facilities in town, whether they go to see the latest plays, films, that kind of thing.
Now we have our own facilities on campus, of course.
Yes, we deliberately omitted those as we really wanted to examine outside entertainment in the town.
Actually, there were a lot of areas to choose from, but in the end we limited ourselves to looking at 3 general categories: cinema, theatre, and music. Right.
Okay, well, first of all, cinema. In the town, there are 3 main places where you can see films. There's the new multi-screen complex cinema, the old park cinema, and the late-night Odeon.
So if you look at this chart, in terms of audience size, the multi-screen complex accounts for 75% of all cinema seats. The park cinema accounts for 20% of seats, and the late-night Odeon has just 5% of seats.
As you probably know, the complex and the park show all the latest films, while the late-night Odeon cinema tends to show cult films. So, when we interviewed the students, we thought the complex would be the most popular choice, but surprisingly it was the late-night Odeon.
Yeah, and most students said that if they wanted to see a new film, they waited for it to show at the old park, because the complex is more expensive and further out of town, so you have to pay more to get there as well. Yes, and that adds to the cost, of course, and detracts the popularity, evidently.
Well, next we looked at theatres. The results here were interesting because, as you know, there's a theatre on campus which is popular, but there's also the Stage Theatre in town, which is very old and architecturally beautiful, and there's the large modern theatre, the Ashtop, has recently been built.
So you just looked at the 2 theatres in town?
Yes. What was interesting is that there are periods during the year when students seem to go to the theatre and periods when they go to the cinema, and we really think that's to do with budget. If you look at this graph, you can see that there's a peak around November and December when they go to the theatre more, and then a period in April and May when neither is particularly popular, and the theatre viewing seems to fall off virtually, while the cinema becomes quite popular in June and July.
I think you're probably right about your conclusion.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
Well, lastly we looked at music, and this time we were really investigating the sort of small music clubs that offer things like folk or specialise in local bands. So not musicals as such. That's right.
We looked at 3 small music venues and we examined the quality of the entertainment and venue and gave a ranking for these. A cross, meaning that the quality was poor, a tick, meaning it was okay, and 2 ticks for excellent. First of all, the Blues Club, which obviously specialises in blues music. This was a pretty small place and the seating was minimal, so we didn't give that a very good rating.
No, we don't recommend that one really.
Then the Sunrise, which plays a lot of South American music, was a big place, very lively, good performers. So 2 ticks for that one. The Pier Hotel is a folk venue, a good place for local and up-and-coming folk artists to play. Not the best of venues, as it's in a basement and a bit dark, but the quality of the entertainment was reasonable and the lighting was very warm, so we felt it deserved an average rating. Finally, there's the Bald Rock Cafe, which features big rock bands and is pretty popular with students. And we enjoyed ourselves there as well, so total marks for that one.
And then did you get any information from the students as to which of the clubs they preferred?
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4. You'll hear a lecturer talking to students about sport in Ireland. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 33. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 33.
Now, today we're going to be finding out about the most popular sports in the Emerald Isle. That's Ireland, of course. Can you guess what they are? Well, there are these 2 lesser-played games, a form of rounders and Gaelic handball. But we'll start with one which is perhaps over 3,000 years old. Arriving in Ireland with the Celts, some claim. That may be a slight exaggeration, but I consider it to be the fastest field game in the world, and it goes by the name of hurling. Well, that's what it's known as in the English-speaking world anyway. So, what do you have to do? You've got 15 players on a team, one of them the goalkeeper. Each one has a stick called a hurley. Here you are. I've brought mine along. Had it since I was at school. This is what it looks like, and basically you have to get this ball, called a sliotar, that's S-L-I-O-T-A-R, so it's not spelt the way it's pronounced. You hit it into the net for 3 points, or you can hit it over the net for 1 point. The goal looks like the letter H, with the net under the crossbar. The goalie has a bigger stick than the others to help keep the ball out. You can also catch the Schlither and run with it for 4 steps maximum, or bounce it on your stick. Is that clear to you all? I'll be showing you a video a bit later, so you can see what a game actually looks like. You might like to think of it as a mixture of lacrosse, hockey, and baseball. Oh, and it's played by women too, but it goes by the name of camogie in that case.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 34 to 40. Now listen and answer questions 34 to 40.
I'll give you a bit of the history, shall I now? Generally, the golden age of the game is considered to be the 18th century. But systematic rules were first agreed and drawn up at that great shrine of learning, Trinity College Dublin, in 1879, founding the Irish Hurling Union, closely followed just a few years later by the formation of the Gaelic Athletics Association. With greater organisation last century, the All-Ireland Hurling Championship got off to a flying start, and I'm proud to say that my own native city of Cork has won more than 20 titles over the years. But then, so have Kilkenny and Tipperary. Is it only played in Ireland? No. Well, it is the only country with a national team at the moment, but you may be surprised to discover there are hurling clubs in London, as well as in America and Argentina, to name just a few. The other game I'd like to take a little time to introduce you to is Gaelic football, which is played on the same pitch as hurling with the same number of players, but there's no net. You just have to get the ball over your opponent's goalposts. And you can do that by kicking or punching the ball. However, you're not supposed to do that to the players, I might add. Imagine it as a combination of soccer and basketball. But in my opinion, it's a more exciting spectacle than either of those. Excuse my bias, if you will. It's also very popular with women. In fact, there are more women's teams than for any other sport. Whether despite or because of the physical contact involved, I wouldn't like to say. They do play a shorter game, 60 minutes, rather than the men's 70. So, let's have a look. If we can have the lights down, I'll see if I can get this technology to work.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Give it to me.